Hey, juniors. We're going to be talking about rhetorical appeals, which are known as logos, ethos, and pathos, and a little bit of the Princess Bride to give you illustrations. Now, the rhetorical appeals are often introduced your sophomore year, so it's possible that you have some familiarity with these already, which will be helpful. Some twoofs about rhetoric. Rhetoric is the art of using language. It is how we say what we say and write what we write. Understanding how rhetoric works can make us more successful communicators and more discerning audiences. It can also make us more persuasive. The goal of persuasion is to change others' point of view or to move others to take action. Remember, that's the goal, the objective of the argumentative essay that you're starting to work on. All authors make choices about how to use rhetoric based on the rhetorical triangle, which you'll see on the next slide. The three main rhetorical appeals are pathos, shorthand would be emotion, ethos, a summary would be credibility, and logos, like logic and reason. Rhetorical analysis is studying the language used by an author or speaker to better understand how they achieved their persuasive purpose. This is what we slowly have started to do as we annotate different works, and we're going to launch into it using Patrick Henry's speech to the Virginia Convention. Now that you understand it a little bit better, we can study how he designed it through the appeals. Aristotle is the one who gave us those terms logos, ethos, and pathos. That's why they sound Greek. And he believed that to make convincing arguments, writers needed to consider three different elements: the speaker, if they're speaking, or author, if it's in writing, the audience, and the purpose, which you can think of as the message. Writers must take into account all three because they're connected and interdependent. The triangle dictates how an author employs the appeals of pathos, ethos, and logos. I'm going to have you take notes on the rhetorical triangle, but I will show it to you again later in the lesson, so you can wait on that once it makes a little bit more sense why they are all positioned on the sides of the triangle that they are. Starting with pathos, this appeals to an audience's emotions. It's often the easiest to identify. It evokes emotions from the audience, like it inspires different emotions. So we don't, therefore, say an author uses pathos. They appeal to these emotions. They evoke, they pull different feelings out of their listeners. They manipulate and they elicit these different reactions. You do have to note which emotion an author is evoking. They might be fear, pride, nostalgia, joy, hope, anger, or something else. Their goal is to affect the audience strongly enough that the audience is provoked to take action for or against something. If you're familiar with The Princess Bride, then the analysis and commentary here might help you. If you're not familiar, hopefully you can still see the sense in it from what it says. And there's a couple different video clips throughout this that you could watch for a little further demonstration. Like the link here will take you to Inigo Montoya as he provokes the man in black to fight on top of the cliffs of insanity. So there's emotion involved there. The analysis and commentary has to do with this character and how perhaps the most famous line from the movie is, "My name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father. Prepare to die." Inigo repeats it over and over again to tell his story and to provide his character with the ultimate motivation, revenge. The sad tale of Inigo's father's death evokes sympathy from the audience, so that when he seeks revenge, we will accept this violence. As a result, Inigo ascends to hero status. It's his emotional story that helps other characters believe in him. Hence, pathos. He appeals to their pathos and achieves a greater purpose. Ethos is a trickier one. It's an argument based on the speaker's credibility and how it matches the audience's values. An author tries to establish that a speaker is credible. You can think of that as meaning trustworthy and reliable, and that therefore the audience can accept and should accept their claims. Ethos can be established through a speaker's experience, their specialized knowledge, like if they're an expert or in the profession, and or ethical behavior. The writer presents the speaker to the audience as honest, and usually they're like the audience in some way. That could be similar values, similar social background, the same religion, etc. And certain speakers have automatic ethos, like presidents, generals, kings, and giants, which is how we get to our example from The Princess Bride. Fezzik, or Andre the Giant, speaks his ethos as he fights the man in black, and the link will take you to that clip. So, a quick note, when in American literature you see speakers talking about religion, especially in the Puritan and rationalist period, that would mainly be the Christian religion and talking about God. That counts as an appeal to ethos because it's a value system. They're appealing to having the same value and believing in the same God as their audience. But for this film, the analysis and commentary could be about how even though Fezzik is a member of a brute squad, his favorite hobby is rhyming phrases. The audience feels much joy as a result of his quirky pastime. They can hardly believe it. Anybody want a peanut? Would be the quote if you know the rhyming scene when they're on the boat. Fezzik values fairness. Here's where the ethos comes in. When Vizzini orders him to finish the man in black with a rock, Fezzik says, "That's not very sportsmanlike." Instead, he strikes a deal, choosing a fair fight. This adds to the irony of his ethos because as a giant, Fezzik enjoys automatic ethos. However, that isn't why the audience finds him trustworthy. It's not his larger than life personality. It's the gentle demeanor, true heart, and honest speech. It comes back mainly to that honesty and how he wants things to be fair. But maybe I am wrong. As Inigo says, that's what's great about English. When analyzing language, whether in rhetoric or literature, there are no right answers. There are technically righter answers if you have more evidence for it. But anything that you can defend with textual evidence, you can argue. After all, a theory is just a hypothesis that needs to be tested. In English class, we test theories by using the text. We hold up our ideas against the text to see if it works and makes sense. If you're going to give me an analysis not backed by evidence from the text, then you have to accept that you might be misreading it and be willing to revise your analysis to something you can find supporting quotes for. In the previous slides, I argued that Fezzik modeled ethos and Inigo, sorry about the typo, Inigo modeled pathos. However, it's just as possible to see these two switched. Inigo Montoya could encompass ethos because though the story of his father may be sad, it also provides the character with credibility, as in when he fights the man in black on top of the cliffs of insanity. Another typo, sorry. He promises to help the man reach the top so that he can kill him in a sword fight. It is his empathetic devotion to his father that convinces the man to trust him. So his background builds believability and trust. And then in contrast, we have Fezzik's kind, humble nature that could help him embody pathos rather than ethos. His heart juxtaposes his size, giving him an ironic caretaker role in the film. As in, we expect him to be mean because of his size, like he looks like an evil bad guy, but then he's the most caring one. For example, he nurses Inigo after finding him in the Forbidden Forest, and Fezzik and Inigo make for a surprising good guys of the film because they appeal to to both the heart and the trust of the viewers. Logos is the easiest one to notice. It's built through the use of facts, data, testimony, reason, and counter-arguments. Appealing to reason is to think or argue in a logical, rational manner. This is one of the main goals of the rationalist writers, so we'll see a lot of logos in texts from this period. Remember, an author cannot use logos. It is created and employed, or in the film, summoned like a shrieking eel. Your analytical goal is to explain how the audience reacts to this logical appeal. Vizzini in the film technically exhibits logos, so that link will take you to the scene where he tries to outsmart the dread pirate Roberts. And to further clarify in the analysis and commentary, in this movie, true logos is sacrificed for the sake of irony. Oh, another typo. My goodness, I'm sorry, guys. For the sake of irony and humor. Vizzini thinks he is the smartest, most logical man in all of Gilder, but his plans keep failing and he keeps using the word inconceivable, leading to the famous reaction quote, "You keep using that word. I do not think it means what you think it means." In the film scene, Vizzini is so sure of his ability to confuse Pirate Roberts with his reason that when it backfires and Vizzini dies, that irony provides the character with the central joke of his existence. So an overview to compare all three at once has this nice little table, which I highly recommend taking some notes on for yourself. Logos, remember, that root log, like logic, reasoning and argument. So a brain is a good illustration of it. You're reasoning with people's heads. Elements that develop it include facts and statistics, historical evidence, analogies, and then hypotheses type, if then premises. If this is true, then this must be true. Definitions, and sometimes quotes from experts that also can go under the ethos table. The effect on the audience is to create a rational response, thinking something like, oh, that makes sense, so I believe her. Pathos is the emotional one. Perhaps if you think of path like passion, that could help you remember. It's feelings, emotions, and imagery, so a heart is a good symbol for it. You're appealing to the audience's heart when you employ pathos. So specific elements used to develop it include very emotional language, powerful and vivid imagery, personal anecdotes, technically especially when they're very emotional based, that will make an audience relate to you, empathize with you, feel pity or anger or joy on your behalf. And then the tone of voice. Again, what kind of emotion is it that you want to get out of your audience? To make them furious, disappointed, depressed, sarcastic, inspired, and so on. Your tone of voice can help. They'll want to match that in you. So the effect is to provoke an emotional response, like the audience thinking, wow, I'm so scared just like him, or I'm so angry just like him, or I'm so inspired that I agree we should, whatever the purpose was. And finally, ethos, the tricky one, has to do with things like ethics. Ethics are like values, so you could use the ETH root to help you remember that one. So ethics, justice, credibility. So the kind of scales of justice might help you remember a symbolic illustration. It's developed when a speaker morally or ethically matches the audience, like a same religion, same social values. They make concessions to the opposition to appear fair-minded. So looking balanced helps lend you credibility, that you're not overly biased. Having a trustworthy character and being knowledgeable about laws, beliefs, and professionalism, which is why a lot of credibility comes from being an expert or having a career in something. The effect on the audience is to provide a feeling of rightness. So your audience will think something like, oh, well, okay, if that's what an expert, law-abiding, morally upright citizen like them thinks, then I should agree too. And here's that rhetorical triangle again. So if you can take some notes on it this time, hopefully you better understand the position of everything. So ethos on the bottom here lends credibility to the author in the audience's eyes. Pathos evokes emotion from the audience to connect with the author's purpose. So their emotions will lead them to agree and want to achieve this purpose too. And then logos over here is how the author employs reasoning about the subject to reach that specific purpose. So have fun storming the castle as we put this stuff into practice. Some reminders before we go. Do not say the author uses ethos, pathos, or logos. An author creates these appeals through various writing choices. Don't simply identify it and then move on. Don't say, oh, well, here's some logos. Talk about instead what effect does the appeal have on the audience and why. We'll be practicing that with Henry's speech. Consider avoiding the words ethos, pathos, or logos in your writing and substitute synonyms and more effective ways of discussing the rhetorical appeals and what they help the writer do in the text or for the audience. If you avoid the words, then you're kind of forcing yourself to get at the effect and the reasoning. Like I said, we'll be trying it in Patrick Henry's speech to the Virginia Convention, looking for instances of all three types. That link will take you to the assignment itself. And our end goal is for you to be better able to employ all three of these appeals in your own argumentative essay. The logic comes from all the quotes and data you've been looking up. The ethos will come as you prove yourself to be credible and trustworthy and knowledgeable about this subject, especially if you can quote from some other, true experts, as you write. And then the pathos might be tricky for some of you, depending on the topic. But how can you get your audience emotionally invested in the end goal, the thing that you want them to believe and side with you on for some greater purpose?